It was a cold, rainy evening in late November, the kind that crept into your bones and made the city feel even more unforgiving than usual. The streets of downtown Chicago were slick with water, headlights reflected in long, broken streaks on the pavement. Most people had hurried home, but one man sat quietly in the back seat of his sleek black car, staring out through the fogged-up window. His name was James Whitaker, a man whose name echoed through boardrooms and magazine covers, a self-made millionaire, owner of several real estate companies, and a household name in business circles. But tonight, James wasn't thinking about profits or meetings. He was trying to feel something, anything. Ever since his wife passed away 2 years ago, life had become a blur of routine and silence. As the car slowed at a red light near an abandoned bus stop, something caught James's eye. Huddled against the side of a closed bakery was a little boy, no older than 7 or 8, his small frame curled up, soaked to the bone. He wasn't just resting, he was asleep, shivering under a thin hoodie, no blanket, no adult in sight. James blinked. For a second, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But as the light turned green and the car began to move, James abruptly told his driver to stop. Without hesitation, he stepped out into the rain. His expensive leather shoes soaked within seconds, but he didn't care. He walked over to the boy, knelt down, and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. The child flinched, his eyes fluttering open. They were wide, scared, and tired. Far too tired for someone so young. "Hey, buddy," James said softly. "What are you doing out here? Where are your parents?" The boy didn't answer. He just looked at James, uncertain and silent. James sighed. "Look, I know I'm a stranger, but you can't stay out here in this weather. Come with me, I'll get you something warm to eat and a dry place to sleep." The boy hesitated, but his shaking legs slowly unfolded, and he followed James to the car. He said nothing the entire ride, just stared down at his soaked sneakers, clutching something tightly under his jacket. James noticed but didn't ask yet. The boy was scared enough. Back at the house, a massive, modern structure nestled in the hills overlooking the city, James led him inside. His housekeeper, Maria, gasped when she saw the soaking child, but immediately rushed off to prepare warm towels and hot soup. James helped the boy out of his wet clothes and noticed how thin he was. Bones jutting out, old bruises on his arms. He didn't ask questions, not yet. After a bath and a warm meal, the boy sat quietly in the guest room wearing one of James's smallest t-shirts and pajama pants that were still far too big. James sat across from him, a gentle tone in his voice. "What's your name, son?" After a long pause, the boy whispered, "Eli." "Eli," James repeated. "That's a good name. I'm James. You can stay here tonight, all right? You're safe." Eli gave a small nod, but said nothing more. That night, James watched from the hallway as Eli finally drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. Something about that child tugged at him. James had never had kids of his own. He and his late wife had tried, but life had other plans. And now, standing in the quiet of his sprawling house, James felt something stirring inside him. A connection, a need to help. The next morning, James had to leave for a brief business meeting downtown. Before heading out, he told Maria to keep an eye on Eli, to let him rest, and to make sure he felt at home. Eli didn't say much, just nodded again, that quiet shadow of a boy still clinging to his silence. The meeting was routine, but James couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to the boy, to those eyes that looked older than they should, to the thing he was clutching so tightly under his jacket the night before. Something didn't sit right. When James returned a few hours later, the house was too quiet. He called out, "Maria?" No response. He stepped inside the guest room, empty, the blankets thrown aside. "Eli?" He searched the hallways, the kitchen, the garden. Nothing. And then he saw the back door, slightly ajar. Panic shot through him. He rushed outside into the yard, still nothing. Then he noticed something near the edge of the property, a small object lying in the grass. It was a photograph, wet from the rain, but still visible. James picked it up. In it was a woman, young, pale, holding two small children. One of them was clearly Eli, the other, a girl, a twin maybe. As James stared at the photo, something inside him shifted. Who was this boy really? Where had he come from? And where was he now? That was just the beginning. James stood motionless in the backyard, the damp photograph trembling slightly in his hand. The girl in the picture, with eyes so much like Eli's, stared back at him, frozen in a moment that felt heartbreakingly intimate. She looked like his twin, same expression, same gentle face, but James hadn't seen her, only Eli. And now, Eli was gone. He rushed back inside, calling out again, louder this time. "Maria!" She appeared moments later, flustered, holding a basket of laundry. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker, I was just... Where's Eli?" Her expression shifted immediately. "I thought he was resting. I checked in on him maybe an hour ago. He was lying in bed." James didn't respond. His mind was racing. He grabbed a coat and headed back out the door, retracing his steps down the driveway and into the neighborhood beyond his gated estate. The storm had passed, but the clouds still hung low, and everything was soaked in gray. Why would a boy like Eli run off after being brought into warmth and safety? It didn't make sense. Unless he wasn't just lost. Maybe he was hiding something. James called his driver, asked him to help search the nearby streets. They spent the next 2 hours combing the city blocks, checking local parks, bus stops, even the bakery where James had first found him. Nothing. No sign of Eli. Finally, James returned home, exhausted and anxious. As he walked through the front door, Maria approached quietly. "Sir, I went into the guest room after you left. I found this under the pillow." She handed him a small, tattered notebook. On the cover, scribbled in faint pencil, was a name, Eli and Emma. James opened it and flipped through the pages. Crude drawings, clearly done by a child's hand. A stick figure family, a woman holding hands with 2 children. 1 boy, 1 girl. Beneath it was a caption written in shaky handwriting. "Our mommy. She's in the hospital. We're waiting for her." James sat down slowly, staring at the page. So it was true. The girl was real. Emma. And now, 1,000 more questions rushed into his head. Where was their mother? Where was Emma? Why had Eli been alone? He turned to Maria. "We need to find them. There's more to this than we thought." Maria, clearly shaken, nodded and offered to help contact local shelters. Meanwhile, James reached out to one of his old friends, Marcus, a retired detective who now ran a small private investigations firm. James hadn't needed him in years, but now he needed answers. Later that evening, Marcus arrived, flipping through the notebook and examining the photo James had found. "This kid's been through something," he muttered, "but what stands out to me is this line right here." He pointed to a scribbled note on the inside cover of the notebook. "We stay close to the hospital. Mommy will wake up soon." James leaned forward. "You think the mum's in a coma?" "Could be. If she's in the hospital and they're not with a guardian, the state would normally intervene, unless they were hiding from someone." "Hiding?" Marcus nodded. "It happens more often than you'd think. A parent ends up in the hospital, accident, illness, whatever, and the kids are left without a safety net. Maybe afraid of foster care, maybe running from someone worse." James felt a knot tighten in his chest. "I'll check the hospitals within a 10-mile radius," Marcus continued. "I'll also send a couple of my guys to talk to folks around where you found him. Somebody must have seen something. The next morning brought more rain. James barely slept. He kept replaying Eli's face in his mind, the way he looked when he first opened his eyes on that cold sidewalk. The fear, the silence, and now that silence was screaming louder than ever. By noon, Marcus called. "I think we found something. A nurse at East Mercy Hospital remembers a woman coming in about 2 weeks ago. Head trauma, brought in alone, no ID, still in a coma. And get this, she had a child's drawing clutched in her hand. They called her Jane Doe because she couldn't be identified." James felt his breath catch. "Do you have a photo?" he asked. Marcus sent one over. It was her, the woman from the photo, Eli's mother. James stood frozen. "She's still alive?" "Barely, but yes, still in the ICU. But here's the twist. Her chart says she had 2 kids with her when paramedics arrived. Only one went with her to the hospital. The other disappeared before they could log him in." "Eli," James whispered. "Exactly." James gripped his phone. "We have to find him. He wouldn't go far from her. He must be somewhere near the hospital." Later that afternoon, James drove out to East Mercy Hospital himself. The neighborhood surrounding it was tough. Run-down buildings, alleys littered with debris, broken glass crunching underfoot. But he didn't care. He started asking questions, showing Eli's picture to anyone who'd stop and listen. Most people brushed him off. A few shrugged, and then, finally, an elderly man pushing a cart full of recyclables paused. "I seen him," he said, pointing toward an alley behind a liquor store. "Little kid, couple nights ago, was sitting there with a girl. They had this ratty blanket and was sharing a sandwich. Told me they was waiting for someone." James's heart dropped. A girl. Eli and Emma were both out there, alone. He ran toward the alley, empty, no blanket, no kids. But something caught his eye. A crumpled napkin with a hand-drawn heart, and the word "Mommy" written in block letters. They were close. He could feel it. But time was running out. James stood in that alley for a long moment, napkin in hand, the quiet hum of the city pressing in around him. The rain had started again, slow and steady, but he didn't move. His shoes were soaked, his coat clung to his back, but none of that mattered. They were still out there. Eli and Emma, 2 children hiding in a city too big and too harsh for kids to navigate alone. He called Marcus immediately. "They were here, both of them. We're close." Marcus responded with urgency. "I'll send 2 men to cover the surrounding blocks. If they're still near the hospital, they may be looking for food or shelter." James wasn't willing to wait. He returned to his car and began driving street by street. It was slow and tedious work. He scanned doorways, dumpsters, stairwells, any place small children could tuck themselves into and go unnoticed. Nothing. Just wet pavement and silence. He passed an old, run-down diner with a neon sign flickering weakly in the window. Something made him stop. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe just desperation. He parked and walked in, rainwater dripping from his sleeves. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 50s, wiping glasses with a rag and looking tired. "Excuse me," James said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm looking for 2 children, a boy and a girl, very young. They might have come in here recently." She looked him over carefully, then gave a small nod. "The boy came in yesterday afternoon, asked if he could work for food, swept my floors, real quiet, real polite." James felt hope surge in his chest. Did he have a sister with him? "Not then," she replied, "but he left with something wrapped up in napkins. I figured he was bringing it to someone." "Do you know where he went?" She frowned, thinking. "I watched him from the window. He crossed the street, turned into that old train yard." James was out the door before she could say another word. The abandoned train yard hadn't seen activity in years. Rusted tracks, broken crates, and forgotten machinery sat scattered across the lot. James stepped carefully through the gates, heart pounding in his chest. "Eli!" he called. "Emma!" No answer. He walked deeper, his shoes crunching on gravel, eyes darting between the cars. Then, in the distance, he heard a soft rustling. Something, or someone, moving. He stepped forward quietly, pushing open the door of a rusted freight car. There they were, curled up under a damp blanket. Eli held his sister close, her small body tucked against his side. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes red from crying. When they saw James, Eli's eyes widened with fear. "It's okay," James said gently, crouching down. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." Emma clung to her brother's arm, and Eli looked down at her, then back at James. He didn't speak, but something in his face shifted. Less fear, more weariness. It was the look of a child who'd been strong for too long. James slowly took off his coat and wrapped it around Emma's shoulders. "You don't have to be out here anymore. Your mum, she's alive. She's in the hospital. East Mercy." Eli's mouth parted slightly. He looked stunned. "She's still asleep," James continued, "but she's fighting, just like you've been." Tears welled in Eli's eyes, but he blinked them back. "I didn't want them to take us away," he finally whispered. "If they found us, they'd separate us. I promised Mommy we'd stay together." James nodded slowly. "You kept that promise. You did more than anyone could have asked, but you don't have to do this alone anymore." After a long pause, Eli nodded, ever so slightly. That night, James brought them both home. Maria had already prepared 2 warm beds in the guest room, and a plate of food waited on the table. Emma clung to a stuffed animal Maria had found in the attic, while Eli sat beside her, eyes still wary, but calmer. James stayed nearby, watching them silently, heart full of something he hadn't felt in years, a deep, aching tenderness. He spoke to Marcus the next day, asking for help with legal guardianship paperwork, not to take them away from their mother, but to make sure they were safe, to make sure no system could separate them again. He also called East Mercy Hospital and requested daily updates on their mother's condition. Every day, Eli and Emma would write small notes and draw pictures to leave by her bedside. It became a routine, one that brought quiet hope back into their small lives. Days turned to weeks. Eli began to speak more, opening up about the nights they spent under overpasses, the meals they'd skipped, the strangers they had learned to avoid. Emma, once shy and withdrawn, slowly began to smile again. And then, one quiet morning, just as sunlight filtered through the curtains, James's phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mr. Whitaker, she's awake. The mother, she woke up this morning." James felt his breath catch. He turned to the children, who were eating breakfast in the kitchen. "Kids," he said softly, "we're going to the hospital." The car ride to the hospital was quiet. Emma held James's hand the entire way, her small fingers wrapped tightly around his. Eli stared out the window, lips pressed into a thin line, heart pounding. Neither of them spoke, but their silence was filled with anticipation and fear. James could feel it. He remembered that same nervous energy from when he used to visit his father during his final days. That strange mix of hope and dread. But this time, he prayed for a different ending. When they arrived, a nurse met them in the lobby, already briefed on who they were. She gave a warm smile to the children. "She's asking for them. She's awake and aware. Come with me." The 3 of them walked through the white corridors. The world outside felt like a different planet. Rain still trickled down the windows, but inside, everything felt brighter, like something sacred was about to happen. As they reached the ICU door, the nurse paused. "She's weak and can't speak much yet. But she's conscious. You can go in, one at a time. Eli looked at James, then turned to his sister. You go first. Emma didn't argue. James knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. Be brave, sweetheart. The nurse guided her in. Through the small window in the door, James and Eli watched as Emma walked slowly to the bed. Her mother's eyes opened wide, glistening. One trembling hand reached for her daughter. Emma climbed onto the bed carefully, wrapping her arms around her mother, burying her face into her neck. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she was safe in the arms that had once tucked her in at night. Eli stood frozen, eyes locked on the scene through the glass. When it was his turn, he hesitated. What if she doesn't want us anymore? He whispered. James placed a hand on his shoulder. Son, she fought through a coma. You were the only thing she thought about. She wants you more than anything. Eli nodded slowly, then entered the room. As he stepped inside, his mother's eyes lit up. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Eli moved closer and gently took her hand. I kept us safe, Mom, he whispered, just like I promised. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her hand squeezed his. James turned away, letting them have their moment. He stepped out of the ICU wing, standing in the hallway, trying to hold himself together. He didn't know why this had affected him so deeply. Maybe because he saw his younger self in Eli, or maybe because for the first time in years, he had let someone in. Later that week, the doctors said she was strong enough to leave the ICU. Her name was Rachel, 36 years old, a single mother. She had worked 2 jobs to keep her children housed until one night. She collapsed from exhaustion and went into a coma. James visited her daily. They spoke for hours. She was humble, grateful, and above all, determined. I don't want pity, she told him. Just a second chance to raise my kids right. He respected that. Weeks passed. When Rachel was finally discharged, James surprised her. He'd arranged a fully furnished apartment just a few blocks from his home, paid for a year's rent. A new job was waiting for her at one of his company's local offices. You're giving me too much, she said, overwhelmed. No, James replied. I'm giving you what you deserve. A chance to live, not just survive. He didn't expect anything in return, but in helping them, something changed in him. The kids began visiting his estate often. Dinners turned into laughter-filled evenings. Emma loved Maria's cooking. Eli started helping James with the garden, even asking questions about the business. One evening, Rachel stood beside James on the porch as the kids played in the yard. I never asked, she said softly. Why did you stop for him that night? James smiled. Because someone once stopped for me when I was sleeping in the rain. She looked at him, surprised. He nodded, eyes on the children. I was about Eli's age, abandoned, cold. A stranger gave me a sandwich and a place to sleep. That one act changed everything. Rachel reached out and gently touched his arm. Thank you for being that stranger to us. He didn't answer, just nodded, watching Eli chase Emma across the grass. Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't money, it's compassion. And sometimes the most important stories begin not with grand gestures, but with noticing someone the world forgot and choosing to care. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to become part of our growing family. Please like and subscribe to Stories of Hope for more powerful and emotional true stories that remind us of the good that still exists in this world. Thank you for watching.